Let's talk now to Mal Fletcher, who I mentioned, who's also the founder of the think tank 2030 Plus and joins us now. Mal, thank you so much for being here. I'm really interested in this concept of a hot response culture. Can you tell me more about the phrase you've coined?
Yes, good morning, Anne. It's great to speak with you. Look, like many of our listeners, I think I'm very thankful for digital tech and things like social media, especially in this COVID season. If we see a COVID-19 vaccine anytime soon, it will be a result of collaboration in the digital space. But we're also, as you've suggested, seeing a heightening of that hot response culture you mentioned, where social media in particular ends up adding more heat than light, where people opt first for a hot response on any issue rather than a calm and more reasoned one. And it probably does have to do with the fact that we've had social distancing and lockdown, so we're not in physical space with people. And that spontaneity of social media encourages that sort of overreaction if we're not careful. I don't think we gain anything, though, when we congregate too quickly behind barricades.
Yeah. I actually told my husband to come off social media for a while because it was making him angry. It was all of these people doing exactly that, these knee-jerk reactions and things. So how do we make sure that we don't lose our empathy, that we don't sort of lose our powers of deep cognition in this social media world?
Well, I think essentially it comes down to simple things like recognizing the power of respectful persuasion, which is much greater than promoting an idea through haranguing or vilifying people. I mean, courtesy and empathy are central to persuasion because they allow people to reconsider their own ideas and weigh up new ones. And I was rather pleased not long ago to hear former President Barack Obama saying much the same thing to young activists in the US. He told them that if all we do is cast stones at one another, that's not real activism, he said. That's not producing change. To do that, we've got to work with and reach compromises with people who don't think as we do. So it's essentially about remembering persuasion is more effective than haranguing.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I suppose we're learning all the time, aren't we? Given the advent of social media, it's not been around that long. And living in such a digital space, I would say half the time, perhaps more than that, during lockdown. I wonder whether this is changing our brains, whether it's actually rewiring our minds.
Well, there's some evidence among neuroscientists. Interestingly, this goes back to the era of reality TV about 10 or 12 years ago. It started to happen that neuroscience began to investigate the effect of hyper-emotional ways of thinking on how our brains are wired. And they began to express concern then, and even more so now, that we may end up being a generation that needs empathy, but we're unable to show it to others. And for me, Anna, one of the big concerns with that is what it does to the thinking of children.
Yeah.
In the post-COVID era, whenever that arrives, we know that education will have moved towards blended teaching more than it has been. So you've got digital tools augmenting but not replacing the classroom. But the tone of things like social media can suggest to children and even young teenagers that the world we live in is a much more coarse, more aggressive place than it is or needs to be. And in a sense, it does take a village, a community to raise a child. So the way we talk to each other online is as helpful or harmful to kids as the way we talk in a public street, I think.
And there's two ways to think about solving that. It's whether you stop children from going online or whether you change the environment which is online, or maybe a combination of both. What do you think?
Yeah, I think let's be honest, it's almost impossible to stop children. If we can't stop ourselves going online, we have difficulty, how will we stop our children? And they're naturally curious, which is a good quality. But I think we need to teach them probably simple things like the fact that a conversation on social media isn't private, that we need to exercise a higher degree of caution than we would in a private phone call because it's a public conversation. And simple things like engaging the brain before the thumbs. Sometimes we slip up, we send a message and they go, I wish I could take that back. Yeah. But as a general rule, I think it's best to express opinions we can back up if we're asked to with something other than emotion.
Yeah, and sometimes saying nothing is fine. No one's going to miss that comment. You just don't need to say it. But I wonder, in terms of our brains as well, it's not just what we're doing. Of course, it's what we're not doing because we spend time doing that. So I'm wondering whether we're perhaps doing fewer hobbies because we're just on our phone scrolling mindlessly through. Maybe we're reading fewer books. We're not painting pictures, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, is that changing us too?
Yeah, I think there's a body of evidence now after, 12, 13 years since social media kicked in with Twitter and others in 2007. There's plenty of evidence now that conversations tend to have changed because of the advent of social media and our reliance on it. And also our high engagement with digital in general means that we're thinking more shallow than we used to. In other words, a study in the US, for example, found that because we multi-screen as much as we do, we think broad and shallow, but not narrow and deep. So we know a little about a lot, but not a lot about a little. We're building transactional relationships with machines. My wife and I have been married 40 years this Sunday.
Congratulations.
When we got married, well, I didn't say it for that, but thank you. When we got married, it was a transaction. You know, Davina remembers some things better than I do, and together we get it right. Well, we do that with machines now as much as with people. We rely on the machine to remember information in things like Pocket or Evernote. We don't store it as we once did.
That worries me, actually, and not using my brain, because they do say, don't they, use it or lose it, right? Well, listen, Mel, thank you. Fascinating talking to you this morning. I hope you have a wonderful celebration on Sunday for that. And that was Futurist, what a cool job, Mal Fletcher, who is the founder of the think tank 2030 Plus.